You know, it's not anyone's fault. Sometimes games and game mechanics just drift apart. RPGs and random encounters used to be inseparable, and now they can barely stand to be in the same room. But it wasn't always like that. There were some good times, right? Let's open the book of memories and see how RPGs and random encounters got to know each other, how they started to get on each other's nerves, lost the magic, and broke up. Who knows, maybe if they tweak a few things here and there, they could become better for the experience. Maybe find another genre.
Wait, what's this? Better be a Wooloo.
Oh wait, Milanote. Excellent. You ever tried to organize a project using post-it notes, napkins, and memories? It's terrible. You're losing stuff all the time, there's no cross-platform support, no one can read your mind. Just a terrible experience. Know what's better than that? Today's episode sponsor, Milanote. Milanote is a tool that helps game designers keep track of their storyboards and mood boards and collaborate with their teams to keep everyone on the same page and keep it all organized in one place. We love it and use it for making our videos too. Here's the one for the video you're watching right now. Milanote uses a drag and drop freeform canvas to help your entire team, designers, programmers, artists, and managers, create boards that help visualize your projects. The UI is sleek and modern, and Milanote even has plugins made specifically with the workflow of game designers in mind. Sign up for free using the link in the description below, get organized, and get your projects going with Milanote. Random encounters have a bad rap now. If you mention that a game has a random encounter system, you'll get an immediate, visceral disgust from a chunk of the crowd. It wasn't always like that though. It used to be a staple of RPG game design, and game mechanics aren't usually added in to be annoying on purpose. In a modern context, random encounters have a lot of problems, but you have to remember that they were built for another age. Like plenty of other RPG tropes, random encounters come from tabletop role-playing games. In many of them, as your party travels the world, the DM will roll dice on occasion. The roll might determine what types of monsters you fought, how many of them there were, or even if you fought any at all. The idea was adapted wholesale to JRPGs, just with the game rolling the dice silently all the time. Games would program in designated zones where you could fight monsters, and roll every so often to see if you would fight something. It looks like a simple system, but there's a lot more going on under the surface. It might be easier to see what it's doing with something to compare it to. Take an action game from the NES era. You're walking around and it's pretty clear what you're going to fight. This guy, hostile. Go get him. Maybe you jump on him or use a weapon, maybe a secondary weapon. Pretty simple. The combat and travel screens are the same screen too, rather than triggering a different mode of play. It works as a combat system, but especially in the 8-bit generation, this type of combat would force some pretty severe technical limitations on your game. Modern RPGs have tons of processing power to work with, but back in the heyday of the random encounter, there were harsh limitations to what you could put on screen. NES games could only display 64 sprites of either 8x8 or 8x16 pixels shown in front of a background. You think this is the sprite? No. This is the sprite. This is a bunch of sprites. Those 64 drawable sprites had to cover everything, from UI, to characters, to special effects. Game Boy games could only show 40 sprites at a time, and only 10 different ones per screen line. There's only so much you could display at any one time. One secret benefit to random encounters was how it let a game switch modes, and let the processor only draw the things that were relevant to the battle going on at the time. You free up as much as you possibly can to show big sprites of unique monsters, groups of monsters, unique battle UI and controls, rather than having to tone everything down because the NES processor can't handle the detail you're aiming for. Second, there's a role for the element of surprise in a game's design, and random encounters are, if nothing else, a fire hose of surprise. But surprise can come in many forms. Let's look at Pokemon. Pokemon's mechanics rely heavily on random battles. How many times when you were younger did you have a dilemma? Your team is on their last legs. You've got just a bit further to go before town. Between you and safety is a patch of tall grass. Will you make it? What will you find in there? Can you handle it? Or will you get sent back to the last town? Or another scenario. Maybe you've got a team you're training with, but you might be pushing your luck a little. If you head to a new part of the world, maybe you could get some good training in. But maybe you get unlucky and something truly powerful shows up all of a sudden. Is your team prepared? Did you bring enough stuff with you? Or are you in way over your head? The randomness of the battle system gives you the chance to feel that gripping suspense, dread, and maybe relief once you get through to the other side. If you could just see what was lurking in the grass, you wouldn't have that level of suspense. The random encounters also make it way easier for the game to make different biomes and even different patches of grass feel mysterious and very different from one to the next. Hiding the encounter behind a hidden roll of the dice rather than seeing them on screen lets you have a much more nuanced Pokemon encounter rarity system. A patch of grass might have a 50% chance of something common, a 45% chance of something else, a 1 in 20 shot of something rare, or a 1 in 8,000 chance of something really surprising. It's a mechanic that's hard to replicate with other systems. If you knew at a glance what Pokemon were where and exactly what you could immediately fight, the thrill of the hunt disappears. Random encounter systems are a vehicle you can use to build mystery. Honestly though, I'm stretching a bit here to find the positives. Random encounters can be interesting systems, but there are so many trapdoors that a game designer can fall into. I mean, the system is literally a trapdoor generator. The random encounter system has gone by the wayside because it's just annoying in most situations. It was traditional, but that doesn't make it any better. The system's unpredictability can lead to drama, but it's incredibly easy to go from dramatic to frustrating. Random encounters are poison to pacing. Their whole job is to keep the player from whatever it was they were doing before. If their goal wasn't find a new monster, the fight is going to interrupt their goal in a way that might be difficult or impossible to work around. Random encounters are especially terribly suited in exploration and puzzle-focused dungeons, which is unfortunate because they show up together all the time. Periodic interruptions are a great way to lose your train of thought. In an exploration context, you might forget which paths of a dungeon you've already gone down. The game gets in its own way. Mount Moon in Pokemon is one of the worst offenders. The cave isn't too terribly huge, but with the small screen and lack of distinguishing landmarks, it's still pretty easy to get lost. Once you do, and even if you're not lost, you have to fight about 10 billion Zubats to get out. You're not helping. In a puzzle context, random encounters don't work much better. You might forget where you were going with that glowy piece, or where you had to push the statue next. The dungeons in Golden Sun had Zelda-style navigational puzzles with key items, but everywhere in those same dungeons you could be caught up in random fights. The longer you struggle with the puzzle, the more fights you'll get into. Even once you know how to solve the puzzle, executing the solution still takes way longer than it should because of the extra fights. In either context, the random encounter is an unwelcome interruption that actively frustrates the process you're taking towards the goals the game wants you to achieve. But even in a straightforward dungeon, without puzzles and without major exploration elements, random encounters can still have a fatal flaw. Even if you know exactly where to go and what to do, you could pull a Skies of Arcadia on Dreamcast and crank up the encounter rate way too high. Random encounters can be a slow-acting poison. Everyone has different levels of patience for interruptions, but each random encounter erodes that patience, bit by bit. Once you've sapped someone's patience for the mechanic, they're no longer having a good time playing your game. Since everyone's level of patience is different, it's difficult if not impossible to tune the rate of random encounters properly to make it fun for everyone. As the generations marched on, the more powerful consoles loosened the restrictions that made random encounters so popular. Without the restrictions, there were new questions to answer. If random encounters were clunky and aggravating, what could replace them? Well, what if you could just show the enemy now? Sorta. Lots of games put monstery sprites on screen, but what monsters the sprite represents are randomly generated after you walk up and start the fight. It isn't too strenuous on hardware, so even some NES games like Zelda 2 did it, and many more used it as the generations went on. Using generic icons lets you keep some of the mystery of what you're about to fight that you'd get from a random battle system, while opening the door to more combat options. Games like Mario and Luigi or Persona 3 used it to add an additional tactical layer that couldn't be done with the usual random encounter system. If you approach the monster from behind or get an attack on them in the field, you'll gain an advantage at the start of a battle. Persona 5 uses stealth mechanics with generic monsters that can give either side advantages in battle, and tie into a dungeon-wide alertness level that over time can change how difficult each fight will be. Okay, what else can we do? What if you could choose how many monsters to fight at once?
Sorta.
The World Ends With You goes a la carte with its non-scripted encounters. At any time, you can enter a sense mode, where enemy icons will appear on the field. You can choose up to 4 to fight in a row, which feeds into a risk and reward system that can get you better stuff at the end of the chain. You have much more control over when you fight enemies, and how much risk you're willing to take on. Something else. Now that we've got the computing power to handle it, what if we just put everything on the battle screen at once? You lose all the mystery about what lurks in the area you're walking through, but in exchange, you get to play with some new tactical wrinkles. Xenoblade enemies are all visible on screen at once, and each enemy has its own unique behaviors for how close you'll have to get and what you'll have to do before it starts to attack you. Some attack on sight, some react to the sound of you running nearby, and some are docile and won't initiate combat at all. The world mixes easier and harder enemies in something that starts to feel like an ecosystem, but it also makes you have to watch your back, lest you accidentally draw aggro on something way out of your league. So random encounters are bad and we're better off without them. Done. Wait, no, not so fast. Just because there have been a bunch of games with bad random encounter systems doesn't mean the idea is unsalvageable. Here and there, games have been experimenting, and there have been a few interesting options. The first fix is the easiest, and probably the oldest. Since the encounter rate can cause so much frustration, let players have some say in how often encounters happen. Either use a slider, like they do in Bravely Default, or even something as simple as items or abilities that stop random encounters altogether is better than nothing. The Repel in Pokemon, the No Encounters ability in Final Fantasy, or the encounter toggle option that you see in some of the modern ports are very crude tools to keep annoying random encounters away, but they are tools. And if you're worried about players becoming underleveled if they choose to avoid encounters, you can tweak that part of the battle system too. You don't have to fight a thing in Final Fantasy VIII. The enemies level up with you if you even try. Though that game is its own can of worms. Anyway, it's still possible to create a battle system that lets players use no encounter tools, at least to some extent. Wild Arms 3 has a migrant seal system, which cleans up another big annoyance that random fights can run into. Backtracking through early locations can make you fight monsters that are way underleveled for your party's current strength. The migrant seal lets you manually skip the encounter, rather than sit through the battle setup for something that isn't very interesting to fight at that stage of the game. You could also look back to the random encounters D&D roots for ideas. Mimics are chests that look exactly like a normal chest that holds an item, but when you try to open one, it'll just attack you instead. The idea plays around with the expectations of where random encounters can happen. They aren't truly random, but for new players, they're unpredictable. If a mimic is introduced early enough, it will set the stage for players to feel uncomfortable, wondering just where the next enemy could come from. It even puts a hint of a random encounter system in genres that don't usually have them. But if you're really looking for something different, take cues from the fan community. The Nuzlocke Run in Pokemon is a fan-created mode of play that leans into the game's random encounter system, but uses a few extra rules that completely change its character. The main ones are, you may only catch the first wild Pokemon you encounter in any area you visit, any Pokemon that faints is permanently out of commission, and you have to nickname each Pokemon you catch so you can get more attached. All of a sudden, random encounters become both a high-stakes way to add to your fragile team, and a terrifying roll of the dice if you encounter the wrong monster at the wrong time. The game becomes a trillion times more dramatic with just those simple rule changes. So yeah, random encounters aren't a completely lost cause, but they're tough to work with. Head on down to the comments. I want to hear your horror stories about random encounters, and if you've heard of any other games that make good tweaks to the formula, let us know. Random battle mechanics were a clever way around a technical problem, and still have some role in introducing suspense to a game, but they've been slapped in and misused in countless designs over the years. They've been left behind in modern game design for good reason. But they aren't totally unsalvageable. Random encounters are a relic, but with a very careful touch, you might be able to recover something worthwhile.